G'day, Rockhound here. Welcome to Mavericks Proving Grounds News, the series where I give you updates about the massively multiplayer tactical shooter Mavericks Proving Grounds, which is currently being developed by Automaton. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this one. This week, the Mavericks developers held their second roundtable discussion, which is essentially an opportunity for members of the team to answer questions that the community have posted on the Mavericks Reddit page. This week's topic was SpatialOS, which is the software created by Improbable that will allow each Mavericks game to be run by multiple servers at once, improving both playability and server response. In short, SpatialOS digitally stitches together all the game information provided by a group of servers and your PC, allowing a large workload to be shared effectively. The first question from the community was, how will players spawn into the Proving Grounds? And this is clearly something that the developers don't want to give away too many details about just yet. However, they did mention that the process will be a key differentiator between Mavericks and other Battle Royale games, and that you will land, so it's definitely not some sort of ground-based dispersal of players. They also said that as players land, they will leave their mark on the landscape for others to see, and the term falling flight was also dropped in during this discussion. If I was to speculate what all that could mean, I would think players may be transported into the Proving Grounds by individual drones, which then land randomly across the landscape. With the developers having reiterated that loot will have less of an RNG element in its location across the map, it would certainly create a level playing field for all players if you actually have no control over your starting location, and this would definitely be different to most other Battle Royale games. It would also mean that the map is fully explored by all players, and we wouldn't end up with a handful of locations being favoured by players like we see in PUBG. In addition, if your landing location is well marked by broken branches and other messed up foliage, and maybe even your landing drone on the ground, it would allow other players to potentially track your footprints as they lead away from your landing spot, adding an interesting element to the early part of the game. Let me know your thoughts in the comments about how the landing process in Mavericks might work. The developers then moved on to talk about how SpatialOS will affect render distance within the game, and it was clear that they consider that Mavericks won't have to compromise the level of detail provided for sake of frame rate. They consider Mavericks' use of SpatialOS to be on the bleeding edge of being able to summarize detail in the distance, and this means that they can provide a much higher level of detail. They also said that they will sometimes use 2.5D projections for some far distance rendering, allowing a lot of details to be shown in high quality at long distances. They gave specific examples of players using binoculars and also 16x scopes when chatting about this, so it's probably a safe bet that we will see both those optics in the game. The next question was one that many players will want to know, and that is, what are the minimum PC specs for Mavericks Proving Grounds? The developers mentioned that a GTX 960 graphics card will be able to have a smooth 60 frame per second experience, and that the game will look good if low graphics settings are needed. I think these comments really speak to how much of a difference SpatialOS is going to make to Mavericks' ability to deal with high server loads, especially compared to other Battle Royale games. For those that do have better hardware, they should gain higher frame rates and more embellishment of details, as you would expect. The developers then talked about how players will be forced together and confirmed that there will be a Battle Royale standard of a shrinking circle. They also talked about how players will be enticed into some key areas of the map, knowing that there will be great loot there, with that being in line with the developers' desire to fundamentally reduce the role of RNG in the game, compared with PUBG for instance. The ability to follow another player's footprints across the map has been brought up a few times already, and the developers expanded on that, saying that footprints can be formed in surfaces like mud, as well as forming from a player transferring mud onto other surfaces like concrete, or even from wildlife in the game roaming around. The team are still working on how to balance this feature within the game, but noted that there really are no limits around it, and if they felt they wanted to, they could actually choose to have the footprints not fade at all throughout the game, if they felt that it worked well. They definitely want this feature to allow for plenty of deception gameplay, so even though you might not be a match for another player's shooting ability face to face, you might be able to outposition and outsmart them using your own footprints. I really like this idea, as it will force players to rely on tactics just as much as their ability to shoot a gun.
Clever girl.
Holy mother, what the... Next, they touched on what SpatialOS does if one of the servers, or workers as they called them, has a failure. SpatialOS has the ability to boot up another worker or just spread the workload across the other workers already running. So a server failure, even if they are rare, wouldn't actually mean the end of the game. In addition, they said that the tick rate for servers will be 60 Hz, but that they could increase that if they felt it was worthwhile and didn't exclude too many players. Importantly, and this is a big one, they also discussed how SpatialOS will allow them to deal with preventing cheating. SpatialOS can deal with a lot more information than a single server, so they will be able to watch much more data coming from your PC, so even subtle cheats will be uncovered. The team feel that because of SpatialOS, they are actually in a much stronger position to prevent cheating than any other Battle Royale game in the market. Now, this sort of statement couldn't be more welcome, and it's something that will be watched keenly by the Battle Royale community. They also touched on what SpatialOS could be used for in the future, and acknowledged that it is likely to be adapted for use with all sorts of different games. I wonder, for instance, whether EA and DICE might look at it for future games in the Battlefield franchise. Automaton, however, are at this stage solely focused on Mavericks, so it can become a gameplay experience that they see as being relevant for a long time, perhaps even decades. Lastly, they mentioned that they are considering going to Gamescom in Cologne, Germany in late August, but at this stage they aren't able to confirm anything. Well, that wraps up the summary of the latest developer roundtable. The next developer diary or Making Mavericks episode will cover how the developers are creating the environment, so hopefully we'll get to see many more images of the game in that episode. Let me know your thoughts on what SpatialOS means for Mavericks and other games going into the future in the comments below, and please consider liking and subscribing if you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.